What you see here, and perhaps not with quite as much visual detail as we would have hoped, is the American Express Red credit card. And I'm going to talk to you today about a credit card, which is probably not something that you're used to as the start of a presentation in international development studies. But if you read the advertisement for this credit card, the American Express Red card, the one that you see, you'll find they say, and I quote them directly, "You can feel great about spending, whether you are buying cappuccinos or cashmere." American Express asks an audience like you to consider what I think is one of the most perverse outcomes of the global HIV/AIDS pandemic. They ask, and I quote, "Has there ever been a better time to shop?" What I'd like to talk to you about is a collaborative book project on a book that will be coming out at the beginning of the year from the University of Minnesota. And the book is called Brand Aid, Shopping Well to Save the World, just like the title. This is the table of contents of the book. You can see, I hope that it's a relatively concise book, but we hope we'll chart the phenomena which we're very interested in studying and hope that maybe some of you would also take up some interest in, that we call Brand Aid. My co-author is Stefano Ponte, and his previous work has been on the role of Africa in the global economy and on issues of sustainability. You may know he did a book called The Coffee Paradox, looking a lot at ethical trade issues and farming in Africa. My own other work has actually been on the politics of access to antiretroviral treatment, particularly looking at a comparative case study in Uganda and South Africa. And so I was very happy to be here talking about that side of my work today. But I actually see this work as very intimately linked. And one reason to be absolutely candid with you is that when Product Red was announced, which is the study of our book, I had just returned from doing 6 months of field work in an AIDS treatment clinic in South Africa. And so in many ways, for both of us as authors and scholars, the book comes from a critical theory perspective, but also from a position of moral dissatisfaction. Just for any of you who might not know the Red products, here's an introduction. The bracelet that you see here was launched by Giorgio Armani's friend, Julia Roberts, the American actress, and was launched in the United States 2 years ago in December for World AIDS Day to help fight AIDS in Africa. 40% of the gross profit margin of these Emporio Armani bracelets actually goes to support the global fund to fight HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. In our book, we argue that consumption, trade, and aid wed dying Africans with designer goods. What you see here is another Red product. It's the Red Cashmere Bikini. Product Red was launched by Bono at the World Economic Forum in 2006 in Davos. And Red was launched explicitly to raise awareness and money for the Global Fund. Under the initiative, iconic brands such as Apple, Converse, The Gap, Armani, now Starbucks and Hallmark have teamed up to produce Red branded products and to encourage customers to do good by dressing well. The advent of what we call Brand Aid explicitly links African development assistance to commerce and not to philanthropy or to traditional forms of aid. A percentage of the profits of all of the Red products goes directly to the Global Fund. I have a very brief video I'd like to show you. I hope that you can hear, and I'll try to be very quiet. This is the Giorgio Armani Red launch of the Red products.
Tonight, by being here, each and every single one of us can participate in changing the world.
This is a treatable disease. It takes 2 pills a day that cost 30p. Just 2 pills. Take them at breakfast and at dinner. So why, every day, do we see the deaths of 6,500 Africans for lack of drugs that we can find in any corner chemist? The Red pill makes you larger. Just say yes. You buy a Red product over here, the Red company buys life-saving drugs for someone who can't afford them over there. That's it. So why not shop till it stops? Why not try some off-the-rack enlightenment. We can spend and destroy. We can wear our inside out. You will be a good-looking Samaritan because, and this is very good news for some of us, sinners make the best saints. That's right. And one last confession. One last confession. It's true, rock stars want to have fun and change the world. But I can't change the world. I can't. You can't. But we can. And we will.
So, this co-branded initiative, in which you can be a good-looking Samaritan, started in 2006, as I mentioned, and it goes to support the Global Fund. Now, some of you, perhaps many of you, already know about the Global Fund and the work that it does. For anyone who's not familiar with it, the Global Fund is an independent private foundation governed by an international board. And it's interesting because it works in partnership with governments, but it's strictly a funding, a re-granting institution, not an implementing agency. RED itself is a kind of cause-related marketing, where sales are linked directly to donations to the fund. So far, the RED grants have been made through the fund's standard disbursement processes and have gone explicitly to the fund's best-performing programs for AIDS in Africa, right? Producing a certain kind of selection, bias, of course. The countries that had benefited from the RED funds were initially Rwanda, Lesotho, now Ghana, Swaziland, and most recently Zambia and South Africa have been added. So far, the Global Fund has gotten about $150 million from the RED initiative. This is only around 1% of all the funds which have been given to the Global Fund since its start, but it is the second largest source of private funding after, you want to guess? Bill Gates, absolutely. So you go from Gates to RED, which is a really interesting comparison about what these new initiatives are, I think. On one hand, of course, it's only a drop in the bucket because the Global Fund receives about 95% of its funding from traditional sources. But on the other hand, it's a very important source of funding and one which the Global Fund has been relying on more and more, and they're certainly talking much more about trying to increase initiatives like Product RED as some of the public interest in funding the Global Fund appears to be waning. Now, in our book, we take a dual approach, arguing that RED has both symbolic and material effects, and particular consequences for its target group, which are explicitly women and children with AIDS in Africa. For example, what you see here is the popular magazine Vanity Fair. This may not be as familiar to all of you, but Vanity Fair is a sort of middle-brow magazine which promotes the chasing of cool. In 2007, Bono guest-edited a special issue of the magazine Vanity Fair, the purpose of which was stated explicitly to rebrand Africa. The Africa issue, as it came to be known, is one of the RED products which seeks to bring Africa to the minds of the idle rich, thus providing an opportunity for them to help. Of course, as most of you already know, given the legacy of slavery, colonialism, the history of extraction of resources, and the supply of armaments to the continent, it's rather difficult to imagine a time when the rich have not been interested in Africa. Yet this magazine featured 22 different covers photographed by the world-famous photographer Annie Leibovitz, who were engaged in a game of what they called visual telephone. And each of these cover makers were people who had done something for Africa. So you see the current U.S. President Obama. Previously, I had on my slide the former U.S. President George Bush, who was also on one of the covers. So Africa, where I've actually been conducting over a decade of mostly what I call anthropolitical field work on health and AIDS, working in East Africa and South Africa, really drove my work to look on this project to investigate what is this happening, this rebranding of Africa. Now, I'm willing to acknowledge in an audience like this one of development experts that it would be very, very difficult to get an initiative that has such hype, such crass consumerism. It would be difficult for this issue to gain credibility as a legitimate contribution to international aid. However, I'd like to suggest that our book demonstrates that Product RED actually needs to be taken quite seriously in the analysis that we're giving of the manifestation of these 4 different attributes. The first, of course, is something that I know you're already familiar with from your work, but also just from the fact that we do live in a society which is based on celebritization. The impact of AIDS celebrities on policy making. Second, the legitimacy of consumption as a vector for helping. Third, the shift away from business emphasis on engaged corporate social responsibility, or CSR, into the notion of distant corporate social responsibility that's disengaged and helping distant others. And finally, the construction of Africans with AIDS as worthy recipients of profits which are generated from heroic shopping. Product Red is a quintessential concoction of current understandings, I think, of best practice in corporate strategy, in aid delivery, and in trade. Red provides a new mechanism for development finance that weds business with health, consumers with celebrities, and doctors with rockers. Now, before you think this couldn't possibly be serious, you may have seen this. This is the cover of the Financial Times, right? Which is, I'm sorry, you can't see the side very well, but this is the actress Penelope Cruz, who's wearing a red product t-shirt from The Gap. And the headline says, "Shopping is politics," Bono says. And underneath what you can't see is, "What does the fashion world think?" And I think it's really important to take some of these things critically, but also to take them seriously. In our book, we argue that Product Red is an innovative modality of international aid financing, and one that's likely to spawn a variety of similar interventions, which we characterize under our larger conceptual umbrella of brand aid. Now, brand aid is basically this very simplified equation where you take a product, a celebrity, and a cause, and you put them together, and then you're able to shop and help at the same time. Now, the need for international development aid to be branded is something that I don't have to teach anyone in this room about, because you know far better about this than I do. We think it comes from the perception that, of course, more funds are needed to raise support for successful interventions, but also that development aid itself has been in dire need of rebranding, in the sense of changing the perception from the public. In the United States, development aid has been under attack from right-wing political constituencies for a long time, but it's also coming under attack even in European countries that had long been ardent supporters of aid, like Denmark, where I live and work. Aid, it's often argued in these debates, is ineffective and wasteful, and business is actually better at delivering development than traditional aid mechanisms. Of course, many of us in the international aid community have responded by developing new public-private partnerships, like the Global Fund, for example, by attempting to reform the delivery mechanisms, by arguing that given the right conditions, including sufficient funding, we can actually make a difference with development aid. The involvement of celebrities like Bono and other aid celebrities in pressuring politicians to deliver more and better aid, especially to Africa, has also been part of this response. Brand aid, therefore, is a manifestation of the need to do something radically new in how development aid is financed, but also in how it is understood. Its relevance, therefore, is not merely related to the amount of funding that one initiative, RED, actually gives to the Global Fund, but much more raising the kind of impact through media exposure that brand aid initiatives will actually have on aid more generally, and how people think about relationships between consumption and donation. Therefore, brand aid changes the representations of consumers as citizens, of good corporations, and of Africa and AIDS. And these representations are more and more important in terms of determining whether or not this initiative is going to have an impact, as opposed to just looking at how much money it might raise. Now, one little bit that I like to talk about, which we expand a lot in the book, and which will actually provide the grounding for some of my future research, is looking into what we call aid celebrities. And I'm very interested to learn from you if you have some ideas about aid celebrities and how they may work perhaps also differently in different contexts. As you know, celebrity activism for worthy causes has been taking place for decades, right? Aid celebrities, however, embody this positive sort of win-win approach toward solving global problems like poverty and disease. Now, after more than 3 decades of defeatism in development, celebrities are the new totems of possibility. They're able to impact because they're able to manage the affect of people who want to care. The Global Fund itself actually rests on foundational work of 3 aid celebrities, one of whom, as you've probably guessed, is Bono, but the other 2 I'm sure that everyone in this room knows as well, Jeffrey Sachs and Paul Farmer, the world's most famous economist and the world's first global doctor. Aid celebrities such as these become trusted advisors on issues of international development that extend beyond the actual scope of their research experience And their presence is actually used to stand in. It's invoked to stand in for particular kinds of beliefs and societal values. Being an AIDS celebrity does not imply that these people were not also a legitimate expert. And we've often been critiqued, well, but Paul Farmer really is a competent doctor. There's no question about that. In actuality, it's the basis of the high-profile expertise and the development work that they did do that made these people become celebrated in the first place. But we're using some work from celebrity studies, a typology about celebrity activism, in which a first wave took place, starting primarily in the US with celebrities in the civil rights movement, moving on to a second wave coalescing around anti-war activism and opposition to the draft, and starting to spread a little bit more internationally. Moving into the third wave, which is where we saw sort of global activism with celebrities. But finally, we think that Product Red is quite different, because in opening a fourth wave of celebrity activism, we see a fundamental break, moving from the old days of Band-Aid, right? Band-Aid with the third wave celebrity activism on international causes, to the new wave of Brand-Aid, which is where you have celebrities active on international causes, but associated with products. And this mix between consumption and donation is where we think AIDS celebrities are particularly interesting and important. As such, AIDS celebrities are development experts, and celebrities whose persona is inseparable from their aid work. But their claims to expertise extend far beyond their formal qualifications. As you know, Bono's trajectory was from celebrity superstar and rock performer into becoming international development expert, while the other two came from being development experts, economists, and physicians, and moved into becoming AIDS celebrities. So we're seeing that there's kind of a spectrum in which they're converging in the middle, which is one of the manifestations of the celebritization of expertise more generally. In the process, identities are formed, indicating who's meant to save whom from what. AIDS celebrities bring legitimacy to initiatives like Red, as Brand-Aid, as a way to save Africans dying from AIDS. So while the modern philanthropists are being morphed into postmodern consumers, the stationary supporting cast is dragged back onto the development stage to justify this newest version of assistance, which we term in the book, the rock man's burden. All of this is managed within a discourse of concern, care, and ethics. In an interview, Bono states, quote, "I represent a lot of African people who have no voice at all. They haven't asked me to represent them. It's clearly cheeky, but I hope they're glad I do." Brand-Aid in general, and the Red Initiative in particular, thus resemble in some ways old forms of international aid and charity, and their reliance on a scripted, suffering stranger. Red depicts images of African AIDS and the Western savior so beautifully as to distract the viewer from the stereotypes. As global relations of exchange appear increasingly complex, these stereotypes become reified and rigid as part of the industry of image making. Representations in Red draw on powerful cultural logics, like the logic of a kind of cultural Christianity, which you could very easily hear in the script that Bono uses, talking about salvation and saints and sinners, and being a good-looking Samaritan. Representations in Red draw on powerful cultural logics, then, to allow the campaign to naturalize global inequalities of race, class, and gender, while approving consumer engagement to mediate their worst effects. In conclusion, we argue that Brand-Aid is the logical manifestation of the postmodern consumers striving for salvation and status. Product Red is a co-branding exercise, focuses on compassionate consumption as a vector of financing international aid. This is one of my favorite Red advertisements, which is also for the American Express credit card, which we started the talk with. You see here the supermodel Gisele Bündchen, who has the caption, "My card," which she can use to spend and save the Masai Marani's "My life." This is the cover of the book, which will come out in the beginning of the year, called Brand-Aid, Shopping Well to Save the World. And we think that we have to understand Red and Brand-Aid within the existing history of selling images of AIDS in Africa. Western shoppers are able to, quote, save African women and children through the power of their purchase. The beauty of this celebrity simplification is that it provides the possibility that everyday people can engage in low-cost heroism. As an American Express Red ad states, just to wind up the circle from where we started, quote, "It provides the union of consumerism and conscience, demonstrating how something as simple as everyday shopping can now help to eliminate AIDS in Africa. Thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.